All right, so we're here, and I guess on this episode we're gonna release the Kraken, as they say. So let's just
I
drop right
can't
in. What
get
were you talking about, Craig?
I can't get to the whole saying. Oh man, yeah, it's time to choke the Kraken.
Oh, sigh. Oh, sigh.
Oh,
Poor Sidney Powell.
all the dad jokes are coming out. God damn.
Well, I
Cry
mean,
havoc and
it's
let's flip
it's
the
it's the
ponies.
weirdest thing to see said on cable news
She must
ever.
have thought she was gonna sound so fucking cool.
I,
Well, I mean,
I mean,
kinda you do, but then also it's
Oh,
cable
if you like
news, so kinda
Fanning
you
Court
don't. Like if that was on a battlefield or something, it'd be like, yeah, okay, that's kind of
I
cool.
would
But
I would argue that that is roughly the political equivalent of let's see if we can make it Pokemon go to the polls,
yeah,
right? Like I
okay.
think that's right up there in
So,
terms of
so you might
I
be
don't
saying that
imagine
she
that
ain't no
anybody
ways
actually
tired.
looks cool.
look. The only thing that would have made it that level is had the any of the movies of recent history with the Kraken come out then. The Pirates of the Caribbean or the that one with that
Well, they remade
Australian
Clash of the
actor.
Titans, right? Yeah, they recently released Clash of the Titans, so I mean, some people are actually going to recognize the reference.
Well, it's like I said, it would have been only been like Pokemon Go to the Polls had like that stuff come out this year.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
that's
true.
it's but it may as well be.
Or if she'd have done like some BTC quote, which would.
God.
BTC.
Don't ask.
Huddle, huddle.
I don't know any titles, and I'm happy to. And anybody listening to this, don't message me with any of them. I hate. Well, I don't hate. There's
No,
nothing to like about K-pop. It's just who cares?
send him everything. Okay. You meant BTS, not BTC.
Did
I
I?
must have heard that.
See, exactly. Yeah, I don't know anything about this shit, and I don't want to.
I
No, just send him. Just either send him shit or like tag
Look,
him.
BTC is Bitcoin. That's all it
Yeah,
is to me.
Yeah, send me all
exactly.
your
That's how it's
BTC. I
heard.
want nothing to do with BTS. Send me all your BTC.
Yeah, every BTC you come across.
Yeah, send them
Half
this way.
here.
Okay.
They will be distributed for enhancement of our lives.
How many politicians do you think we could convince that BTC is like a refuse that is clogging up the tubes of the internet, and we could go ahead and hire ourselves out as BTC cleaners.
At
You know,
least 30%.
novelty cleaners.
I would say at least 30%.
It always stuns me, right? Like you have these not scientists. I don't want to say scientists because they're nothing like scientists. But you have these people, right, in politics, and they sit there and they come out, and they're supposed to be like the best and the brightest. And I can't quite tell if they're acting like they're morons or they are actually morons
Oh, they're not
because
acting.
like somehow they are on basic stuff that you can kind of assume normies know most of like the ins and outs of. They act and say the dumbest things, and I think the internet is filled with tubes or made of tubes or whatever it is. It's
A
kind of up
series of
there.
tubes.
So I think I'll put it like this: there's a range, and there's two extrema of it. The smart extrema is that guy who thought that Obamacare was going to be the best thing that ever happened, and who thought he was smarter than every American. The MIT guy.
Oh,
Ugh.
I thought you were talking about the guy that got a shiver up his leg.
No. The MIT.
No, I know what he's talking about. Back in the day, there was that guy that thought he was absolutely brilliant,
There's
and
that person, and then there is that brilliant guy in Congress who was asking about if we've stationed our troops evenly on Guam, because if they all stayed on the base, it might capsize the island.
That sounds like the kind of person that would be worried about moon rocks being thrown down at us.
Well, you see, the difference is this one didn't need a transition surgery.
Fair point. Fair point. So is that more abled or less abled? I can't even tell anymore.
it all depends, right? Is it maybe it's disabled,
I don't think
right?
disabled is actually an adequate way of describing anything to do with these people.
I don't know if there's really adequate
Derek
words to
entered
describe
into it.
these people, if we're being honest.
It's just always stunning to me because I watch them sit there and talk about things, and it doesn't matter which politician it is to a greater or lesser extent. Like, it doesn't matter whether it's somebody I like or somebody I don't like. Like Trump does the same kind of shit too, right? But at least you generally understand that Trump doesn't know what he's talking about and he's not pretending to be. But then you got these folks out there that are like, we're gonna make climate change is a perfect example. They're like, oh, the end of the world is happening in 12 years. Like, that's not what any scientist anywhere has said.
Now, here's the way it would actually be better spoken, I think, to really hammer across the fact that they don't know much. And this is the reason why people don't really gather, because they say with a solemn tone, and they put out numbers which don't actually represent what they're saying, but somehow people just, I guess, imagine they do, and they hear
Yeah,
numbers. So instead, if they just come across and said, look, we're going to have a doomsday. We're going to have the best doomsday. We're going to have so many doomsdays. You're going to have so many doomsdays. You're going to be tired of the world ending. And we're going to be here for 12 more years. And then the joke ends and nobody gets that fun bit. I don't know. Somebody might have actually laughed out there. We'll find out.
I doubt it. I doubt it because it was kind of a terrible joke. But
What? I mean,
I enjoyed its terribleness. But I mean,
that's part of it, really.
Well, it's part of the
you
experience.
you do run into these things, and I mean, like, I get it, right? I know that. So engineers, right? We're kind of a unique breed. Our sole purpose is to solve what are known as wicked problems, and these are things that require. What's that?
I said real problems.
No, I'm talking about like the wicked problem, right? It's a specific class of problem where there's no like good solution, because it's a very complicated thing. It involves
where do you
a lot
put
of
nuclear
disciplines.
waste? Do you put it in the orphanage, or do you put it in the water treatment center?
That's really easy. You just reprocess it and extract these materials.
That's the kind of example. That's the
Right.
a contrived example of it is.
But what
no
you
good
end
outcome.
what you end up getting, well, I mean, I think another one is, well, I guess I'll bring that in. So for us, right, we take a look at a variety of different things. We take a look at risk, we take a look at cost, and we take a look at the actual impacts. And so we kind of dabble in the sciences, and we kind of dabble in economics, and we kind of dabble in math. We're not like somebody who's a master of any one of these things. But the whole purpose and the reason that we dabble in these things is so that we can talk to the scientists, and we talk to the economists, and we talk to the mathematicians and say, okay, somewhere in this triangle of what each of you is saying is what's actually going on. And we, every single time, I don't know, I'm sure Craig probably has to deal with scientists, but they're like corralling cats. They would happily infinitely study a problem, and they speak. They have no practical understanding as to, like, they don't put it into perspective. And that's really what an engineer gets paid to do, is to put whatever thing, whatever claim, whatever product into perspective. And I understand that this is not like a common skill set, but I would expect the people who are controlling the government to have a general understanding of how to do that. I'm not expecting them to go like have the science basis or the math basis, but I am kind of expecting. But I kind of expect them to have something,
Yeah, well, that should be part of their job description if you ever want them to do it.
Right? Yes. Yes. Instead, it seems to be what gets them the most likes and votes and all the other stuff.
The elected positions, that's kind of the genesis of the entire thing, isn't it?
One like equals one vote.
So
remember to like and subscribe.
You're not go. So with that's actually the important thing about having a scientist involved, real scientists, not the ones that are out there to have a fun time with their agenda. So we covered this before, where if you look at the papers that might take a position on anthropogenic global warming or climate change or whatever, a lot of times what you'll find is that it's a preface or a pretext to open the topic before narrowing in on the actual subject matter that they're trying to study, which is not going to be climate change. It's going to be something specific,
right.
The absorption of blah, 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 certain forcing factors in their equations for the modelers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not going to be, we're studying climate change. They're studying something specific. So what will happen is later on, they're not going to have a position in their conclusion. They're going to have, here's what the data showed, and then they're going to stop. because that's all
For
you're
good
like.
scientists. For good
Yeah,
scientists, yes.
Exactly. So for the majority of the scientists who are working in the fields like climatology, you're going to find this is the way that they do their stuff. But when you go and you start looking at who is selected to be on, say, I don't know, a panel that is under, say, some political charge, they're not going to be looking for people who are competent scientists. They look for competent politicians.
Well, but I mean, I don't mean like I understand that aspect, but what's
That's
a
the other side of
surprise to
things.
me.
But yeah, they'll study things at depth and nuance, and the point isn't to come up with a practical solution necessarily. It's to say, here's what the data suggests, here's what the data says, here's our interpretation, and then that's it.
And the problem that I've seen in dealing with scientists that I deal with at the lab is they will happily do that indefinitely. And they never ever land on a concrete thing, which is really what the engineers get paid to do, is to put it into perspective.
Well, they put it into practice.
Not well, sometimes it's put it in practice, but a lot of times it's to sit there, so we'll, if I'm on a project or something like that where I'm directly interfacing with our scientists, my principal role is to say, okay, does this actually fucking matter?
Well, here, let me give you an example between two different journals. So there's the Journal of Chemical Engineering Data, which you might have an idea of what they publish, and then there is
I'm guessing gender studies.
Exactly. So yes. And then the Journal of Rheology is exactly how much they scream when you put them under pressure.
That's right.
So like for instance, I'm working on a paper right now, and the difference between, say, a pure science paper or something I would say publish in chemical engineering data. So it also depends on what journal you're targeting as to what kind of paper you're going to write. But if I was just doing a data journal, I wouldn't have anything beyond just the data in it, really, and description of what was going on. The fact of the matter is that this is actually a preface to another paper I'm working on, where I have to actually use the information from the first one. So in the first one, I'm going to have, here's a plot of what results of this thing, and here's how to apply it to a practical situation for processing. So that's a distinction that you're going to find in some more applied science papers, or applied science journals.
What I was really getting at is when we start talking about whether it's the election stuff or whatever.
That's what I mean about practicality.
Is that we were really good at quantifying things and putting it into like perspective. So when we start talking about like, well, let's talk about this fraud stuff, right? So we have Sidney Powell over there who wants to release the Kraken, and she hasn't presented any evidence. And every single time I see all these people who are sitting there and talking about all of these things, and they're researching all of these possibilities, I think it was a really great one in Craig's channel where they're like, if they just changed the capital I and lowercase l, they could make Republican not vote for Trump. And you're like, dear God, people, right? Like, it's sitting there in perspective. Those are things that would be easily provable.
Yeah.
And there's
well,
nobody.
Don't you know, if Ross Ulbricht had been pardoned, don't you know that every single person that voted for Joe Jorgensen would have voted for Donald Trump?
My God.
Oh my God.
So I should go ahead and explain something about my Twitter feed right now, and some of the shit that I've been posting in that other Discord.
Provided you can see it, of course.
I'm not like.
Do you really want to do that, Craig?
I'm just going to explain very quickly
for a moment.
me shit posting about the election fraud or whatever. Look, I'm basically along for shits and giggles, and I'm on the ride and I'm watching the shit go by. So if I'm pointing stuff out and I'm just like, oh, that's interesting, I'm not sitting there screaming, there's fraud.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not saying. I'm saying that these.
I'll just say, like, there's people who.
Yeah.
There's other people who've probably like this one guy who knows me to be a fairly rational person on occasion was confused as hell a few days ago as to why I was posting. It's like, I don't get your angle. It's like, dude, I'm just seriously, this stuff's right here. Like, I'm not gonna not look at it. It's hilarious.
Wait, was that me?
No, this is another guy named Mark. Similarly minded. He's also a STEM guy.
Well,
so he was curious as to what the fuck was going on with my head, because clearly, I'm posting this shit with just eye emojis.
I mean, so the weird part is, right? Like, when we did a stream on election night, and on that stream, it was pretty clear that Trump was going to win. And I wasn't so sure about Arizona. I mean, we talked about this, right?
Well,
We weren't so sure
I
about
would,
Arizona. We weren't really sure about Georgia, but
yeah.
North Carolina looked like it was in the bag. Alaska was like 60 some odd% in favor of Trump, with over half reporting, and they just called it for him like 2-3 days ago or whatever. But then we looked at Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania,
Well,
and
so I'll
those
say
three
this:
states looked solidly for him.
we also had, I think as a group at the time, and I'll claim as much for my own self, regardless. It's as much my fault as anyone else's. I think there was a bit of confirmation bias going on, and
Oh,
I
I'm
just thought he
sure.
was going to win. So I've clearly Biden had a shot, etc. But it did not look like it was a very clear chance.
It really didn't. And I
And
mean,
then
like
there was
when we start,
130 odd thousand votes that came in at 4 a.m. in a couple
yeah,
of
yeah.
states. So,
Well,
Well,
and
in
that's
one
kind of the
state
thing
alone.
is you turn around and you start looking at the stuff. The
but
reason that people
there's
are hopped up
explanations
on
though.
there is, they're not
Well,
particularly good.
for instance, the fact that a lot of these fraud explanations I've seen out there
Well, perfect example of
rely
that
on the
is
supposed
the water main
capacity
leak.
of the post office of being some kind of shuffle. It's not a random shuffle. It
Yeah,
is
those were
never a
weird.
random shuffle.
Those were weird. I was actually, so the stuff that I found that I find most well, actually the Benford's Law thing is interesting in the sense that, like, I wanted to see what forensic accountants would say about this whole thing, because
That's the
those are the
interesting thing.
people, those are the fundamental people that, like, election fraud is going to be just like laundering money.
Well,
That's
see, that's
really
the thing,
what it
though.
is.
But it's not. That's the thing. It's not because of the scaling issue. The fact
Oh
of the
yeah,
matter is that you don't have multiple orders of magnitude involved, so Benford's law just doesn't apply.
right.
Now that the paper that's usually cited to specify this is from 2011, but there's a follow-up paper that investigated using the second digit Benford's law, because there's Benford's law for multiple digits. There's generalizations, and the second digit one seemed like it was a little bit more applicable, but they cited the same scaling issue. And basically, if you're using Benford's law, you have about a 50-50 hit or miss on whether or
Right,
not it's going to capture anything.
exactly, and that's kind of the thing. Like, that's what I was expecting is I was expecting accountants to weigh in and say, this is how we go look for, laundered money, and
Right.
they came in with this thing saying, oh, yep, it kind of looks like fraud, and then just everybody seized on it, and you're like, okay, that's that
Well, the other thing
doesn't
is
say what you think it does.
asserting outright that the post office or the postal system produces a random shuffle. It's outright ludicrous. It just does not. When they count the ballots that come in, they know where they came from. It is heterogeneous over both space and time. It is simply not going to produce a random shuffle. So
Right.
when they blanket assert this and then they try to apply Benford's law, it's just not going to work.
Right. Well, I
Well,
mean, and those like that's I think the thing is, every single person who wants to talk about statistical anomalies, I think that there are some anomalies there, right? And that like
Like,
the actual stuff that is more indicative to me, that is probably in that, is the bellwethers not actually predicting the election.
yeah, that's an
And
excellent point, as a matter of fact. The bellwether
when we went,
cities have, what, since 1964 been accurate?
it,
yeah, but you
I
see,
mean, not all
that's
of
a good
them, right?
streak. But it is it's a good streak and all. But at the same time, that is a gambler's fallacy.
Not
It's
necessarily. No.
to a degree. To a degree.
Hold on, Craig. Right. The whole point and the reason the bellwether states generally predict the bellwether states, or such as Ohio specifically, is what I'm going to be referencing, or these towns. The reason that they have such a good history and track record of predicting elections is that they generally have a mix of people which roughly corresponds to the general population.
You might say
So
they're a good microcosm.
Okay.
right, it would be a representative sample, so to speak, and that's really what the bellwethers are. Now, this actually does stick out to me because the reason that people say, as Ohio goes, so goes the nation. This is not just in terms of, like, our electoral system and our voting system. The reason that every single major fast food company has their headquarters in Ohio is not because it is a particularly great place to do business. It's like at the beginning of the Great Plains, there's almost no way in and almost no way out, but the reason that they go there is because they can do their test markets and their test foods in there because the actual Ohio population is pretty representative of the rest of the country. So if they want to try a new product, they release it in Ohio first as a test market, and if it does well in Ohio, then they can generally export it to the rest of the country without too many problems. So when Ohio goes as strongly red as it goes, and somehow we end up with Biden, that's a little bit more suspicious than Benford's law, in my personal opinion. Just because it's more of a psychological thing than it is a random numbers game.
Right.
So I see stuff like that, and that stuff stands out to me. We do have things like the 6,000 votes that got switched from Trump to Biden.
Yeah.
In Antrim County. I'm what surprises me there is I'm not seeing anybody sit there and investigate the rest of the counties. Like you would think if you found it once that you should probably double check.
On that note of
Yeah,
a single
it's
county, as a
court
matter of
area.
fact, let me bring something interesting up in that. Arizona largely turned itself down on the Dominion voting systems, but there is one county that decided to go with those.
Yep.
Can you guess which one?
Maricopa.
Why, yes. Ding, ding,
How
ding.
about that?
Well,
Curious.
but I mean, the thing with the Dominion stuff, right? I see a lot of people talking about Dominion, and I've seen some stuff like it turns out that there's a significant portion of major Democrats who are shareholders in this system, which actually it would make sense, right? If they're politicians, they're going to probably invest in technologies that are in their field of interest, right? I invest in energy tech.
Here's another way to put it. After 2000, a lot of people pushed for electronic voting.
Yep.
And my guess is that these investors are long-term investors, especially after the 2008 with Obama. My guess is, or sorry, 2006 with under Bush. My guess is that a lot of them are long-term investors, and that they aren't nefariously invested in the company. Instead, what they've done is found a way to externally enrich themselves through the process, so that they're not just getting the piddly pay they get out of sitting in office.
Well,
Without it actually being like an evil, kickback scheme or anything. They just made
exactly.
a smart investment because they were in the know and they knew that the direction
all they do is somebody sitting there and looking at something, and you have a county that is, say, very Democrat. You pitch to the county, say, hey, why don't you go do this? And that's all it really is. But there is some sketchy stuff with the Dominion stuff in terms of the fact that it's not one case where they had votes switched, like the Trump to Biden switch, but they also had another Republican politician who had his votes switched, which when they fixed the error, all of a sudden he went from losing to winning. So I kind of would think that people would actually do an audit of those systems to make sure there's no funky shit in there.
Yeah, you would think that a person who is wanting to unite and bring people
Right.
together would say, okay, well, you know what? We can go ahead and solve all of your all your issues, all your questions. We'll go ahead and do the audit, make sure it's all above board so that you know it's okay.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that in court immediately. That would be the first thing if I
absolutely
was a lawyer, is I would have gone to each one of these places and said, look, we have an actual report of a problem. Let's audit and canvass ballots to make sure that they voted the way they voted.
And
but
they've tried to come out and say, oh, it's human error, but that's a bullshit response. If it's human error in one place, there's no reason that same error can't be made in other places.
Now,
and we should check that.
That shouldn't, so that there's no reason. I mean, even if they say it's cost, they're talking about a few $1 million. And if you look at the size of our fucking debt and how much we're willing to spend on stupid shit, the election is the first thing I could say we can honestly spend $1 each. As a nation, we could all put $1 into the pot here and still have way more money than we need to get an audit done for every single ballot in every single state.
Yes.
So there's no reason for us to avoid an audit. So there's no reason for a judge to say no.
Yeah, I would have no issue with a full 50 state deal.
System that we have a definite thing where something actually happened. I see no problem with going through and checking that thing and making sure it didn't happen elsewhere. That's a no-brainer. There's other stuff that is
Biden's benefit to go ahead and do it anyway, because suppose Biden comes out the winner, he's now got the best argument, the best foundation to push back on any claims of illegitimacy
Yes,
by
he does.
having an audit done in every single
And
state.
and if
Any
anybody thinks that we're not going to find out the answer one way or the other, we absolutely are. Whether it comes out tomorrow or whether it comes out in June of next year and creates a constitutional crisis is a whole that's kind of the issue.
that's
But
the
there's some other stuff too. So we've talked about the bellwethers, which I find a little bit more indicative. The Benford's law and the other sorting shit, whatever. But the bellwether sticks out to me. The Dominion voting systems with the actual vote flipping there, that sticks out to me. And the other thing that really sticks out to me is the hyper registration in Wisconsin, right? That's a little bit fishy. You don't get 200% voter turnout. It doesn't happen. You can't turn around and tell me the same day registration got you a 200% voter voter
now
attendance.
we have
Well,
to go ahead.
maybe if
So this is
women
the
vote
same
with
way.
their maiden name and their married name, you could maybe pull that off. But
This is the same way
certainly
you had
something like that wouldn't happen.
This is
Well,
the
no,
same
I
way
mean,
about the Shiva analysis. Hold on a second, because this is
I
important.
didn't even bother with that. Dr. Shiva is kind of weird.
The magnitude of the populations here is important too, because if you have a population of say 10 in a precinct and 20 people come in and vote, that's a whole lot different than having a population of, I don't know, 20,000 and having 40,000 come in to vote.
Yes, yes.
So,
I mean that's so if you're talking
a
about
little bit of that going on, but
registered to vote is not the same as the overall population. But regardless,
right.
you look at some places like Australia where it's mandatory, they still pull at most 95% in their elections, and you're talking about 200% turnout in a voluntary situation.
Well,
I absolutely think there's some fuckery going on in
this
Wisconsin.
was what, 5 standard deviations above the mean for voter turnout, I think?
Exactly. Yeah, it's insane.
Which is virtual. It's not that it's impossible, because until it's a very young country, and until you have enough precedent. Because remember, presidential elections are not very frequent events.
We've got 50 sample data sets, so to speak.
Right, but and then that's it. So
right, I'm not. That's not to say that's a bad sample size, right? That's better than what you see in most psychology papers, but it's still a sample size.
Right, but it's changing over time and space, and
yes,
yeah. So it's not it's when they say 5 standard deviations above the mean, the number of data points that went into that are relevant is not very large.
right.
So it's not like it's unprecedented and it can't happen. It's just eyebrow raising.
And that's kind of the thing is, so you look at this. So Wisconsin's got this, and this looks fucking sketchy. Michigan has the Dominion voting system, which is absolutely sketchy, and they also have some other funky stuff. I think that's where most of the affidavits are.
Now,
I
was
don't know if
Michigan
you
the
guys
one that had
caught
the last minute updates, like the day before or even the night of,
which
on their
one's
Dominion
that?
systems?
That was Georgia.
That was
that was
Georgia.
Georgia. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
The one that had
And
the
I
problem
think
that they fixed in the middle of the day.
I thought it was Arizona too.
So they had Dominion claimed that they had a systematic error in their database. I guess probably a structural error. And so the way they work is it's a different company that does the smart cards that they use to log a voter in. So it's like think of like having your registration card at that point. So you come with your voter registration, they give you a smart card, because why would you want to have one system? And then they go and use a smart card to log into the voting machine. Then they cast their ballot, and then they return the smart card on the way out. So the database they used to do the login thing was supposedly somehow systematically flawed, so that the person would get the wrong ID on their smart card.
The smart card did not properly wipe each time.
Something
so basically what would end up happening is you'd get people who would get a smart card and they'd go to use it and it would say you've already voted, because it didn't wipe the registration of the smart card when they put it back in their system.
I think that was day of. The night before the update was for the database.
Got it.
So what would happen is the same. So that's actually a result of the problem they supposedly fixed. The problem was that the wrong voter was put on the card, and so if you came in with a registration and someone else got your ID already, you're supposedly already voted.
Now, I do not believe I do not believe that I don't think that Dominion, as a voting company, would likely switch votes intentionally. That doesn't mean it can't be done unintentionally, and that doesn't mean there can't be a few bad actors. And that's all stuff that we kind of found out in with the 6,000 there, and that's why we should kind of audit their systems, right, to make sure that they're actually electronic voting is kind of a new thing, right? But again, the fuckery that I'm seeing is Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and I'm not seeing this like widespread thing. It's just, it looks like Michigan, there was a whole bunch of people who were in Michigan who actively, like, you look at that and that's like 11,000 affidavits, and that's where you get ballot dumps, and like that's all in Michigan. Pennsylvania's fuckery appears to be purely legal fuckery, which I think Trump is on track to actually win that. And then Wisconsin is this like
Anna, actually, let me
registration
cut in on you with the Pennsylvania thing. There's also a secondary case that was brought beforehand by, I believe, the local lawmakers, possibly, that if that case goes through, it would invalidate anything received or dated after basically the date of the election.
Well, I'm glad they got told to prevent the mixing, because otherwise that wouldn't be possible.
Well, the only problem, though, is, so first off, they were originally told to stop mixing, right?
Oh, yeah,
and
they were told that
they didn't listen to
they got
that.
a court
then
order.
Alito stepped in and said, no, yeah, you really actually do have to not mix these ballots. And I think I was hearing at least this is like this is my Tim Pool update for the day. It sounded a lot like they actually ignored Justice Alito and continued to friggin' mix them in, so they might have to throw the whole batch out.
Yeah, that could result in anything that they received after that first order having to be, just cast out, any vote, whether it be for
what might happen if a large enough group of ballots gets invalidated, then the legislature might not have any other moral choice but to say that the election was corrupted and select electors like they did in 1876.
Indeed. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I wouldn't mind seeing a special runoff in these states. Just an observed special runoff. I mean, that would be the fairest thing that we could do, but I don't think fair is exactly what we're looking at getting.
You're talking about a lot of jingoists that aren't going to appreciate anyone stepping in on their partisan patriotism. They're not going to allow anybody to come in with a fair election at this point.
Yeah, I don't know. I could see. So it all depends. If they end up throwing out the 500,000 or whatever, or almost 1 million, it's like 600-something thousand ballots because they violated the court order. I could easily see them have to redo the whole thing.
I could see the people responsible not living in the country for a long time. Because I gotta tell you, I don't think a prison's gonna save them.
Well, it's really funny.
Like, they better call a bitch and have someone bigger taste all their food for them, because holy shit, would they be in trouble.
I don't understand who thought it was a brilliant idea to just ignore, the Supreme Court.
Well, you're talking. We are talking about people with, IQ lower than average room temperature.
The only thing I can think of is basically the Democrats were arrogant, and
to put it lightly,
and basically said, hey, why don't we just whatever? It's going to be a Biden win. And so we don't have to pay attention to this because it's not even going to get contested.
No questioning of what the future holds. It's all the narrative. The party message is the reality.
Yes.
Dipshits.
War is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength.
Well, it's just, it'll be funny. I would laugh so hard if they say, yeah, you got to throw out three quarters of 1 million ballots.
Like I said, what you don't do is you don't fuck with the money, you don't fuck with the vote, right?
And you also don't fuck with the Supreme Court.
Right.
Especially when you need them to back you against Trump.
Yeah, it's like just.
And on that exact note, let's just talk about the Supreme Court makeup as it stands today, synchronicitously enough. So we've got Clarence Rape Ape Thomas if I'm to quote Joe Biden.
Oh,
Is
We've
that an
got-
actual Joe Biden quote?
That is an actual Joe Biden quote.
holy
I
shit! They elect-
I am going to look this up.
Oh, yeah.
Oh God.
We have Amy Comey Barrett and Kavanaugh, who, interestingly enough, were young lawyers in the year 2000, and they went down to Florida for
Right.
something.
Well,
They
4chan
went down
blocked
there to
that
figure
post.
out what the deal was with hanging chads. And, well,
Yes.
it turns out we found out something interesting from their findings. And so did the Supreme Court. And
Well,
look at who's back.
well, I mean, it's kind of interesting, right? So if we're gonna go into that makeup, right? It's not as simple. A lot of people didn't understand the Gore v. Bush decision. I didn't until like this past week, because I was a liberal at the time, and so my entire understanding of the world was basically George Bush stole the election, and he was a war criminal and blood for oil and all the other shit that they used to talk about.
Well, that second part's
But
absolutely true.
apparently, when Donald Trump goes to try to actually pull the troops out, that means that he's Hitler. So whatever. Go fuck yourselves, lefties. Right? Bush v. Gore, the actual premise of this was that different counties had different standards for how they counted ballots with the hanging chads thing. So the hanging chads, they used to do hole punches. And so the problem that they had with this ballot is that they didn't offset the ballot on. It was a two-sided ballot, and they didn't offset it properly.
Oh God,
So-
they did the same shit in elections previously. The big problem was that Gore lost.
Well, yeah, he did. But so then what
That
ended
was
up
their
happening
chief
was
issue,
when they
buddy.
went to go recount, what ended up happening was some counties were allowing people to cure their ballots.
Right.
And this was if it was a little bit ambiguous as to what it was supposed to be. They would either try to do an interpretation. They do their little interpretive dance and pray to the liberal gods and say this is what it's supposed to be. Well, and other counties
Quick
tended to
correction
be
to the
Republican,
leftist gods.
didn't
Liberals
do
are
that.
actually not horrible by definition. Leftists kind of are. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, well, there's a distinction.
Regardless,
Tomato, tomato.
Right.
Anyway, continue.
At the end of the day, what they ended up choosing to do was some counties were allowing this process to go through where they tried to fix it so they could count the ballot rather than just putting the ballot aside as uncountable, where other counties, particularly Republican counties, were sitting there and basically tossing it into the trash heap. And Bush v. Gore was saying that if you have County A over here, which is attempting to do an interpretive rain dance to figure out what the hanging chad was supposed to be, and County B, where they're throwing it out, those ballots are not being handled equally, and because they're not being handled equally, you can't count either of those ballots. They have to be done to essentially the minimum standard, right? Which would be everybody throws it out.
There's part of the argument that was different, namely in that the results, the outcome of the way that it was being argued, is that Gore would get recounts done in counties that benefited him and not in the other counties.
Yeah.
It was really the ultimate goal of the whole entire exercise. They didn't give
that was also true.
Confused.
And if I'm to understand it correctly, some of the actual legitimate recounts that went on after the fact didn't really reveal anything new. It basically turned out that the results were largely the same. That Bush actually won in the end.
There was one or two that found that Gore won, and one or two, but don't forget, when we start talking about where Trump's at in terms of how far down he is, the Trump v. Gore thing was a few hundred votes. In Bush v. Gore, it was a few hundred votes. Trump v. Biden, it's like a few thousand votes. So you basically almost have to prove impropriety in order for that to be a significant difference.
Yeah, just a quick side note there. How fucking funny is it that that one popular person, the one time traveling hacker victim, said that the reason 538 is named 538 is because of the Bush v. Gore count.
I know not of what you speak, good sir.
Oh, you don't know about the time traveling super hackers that caused one more person to be unfortunately outside of the woke totem pole.
What has John Titor done now?
So Joy Reid was the brilliant genius who recently declared that 538, Nate Silver's website, his outfit is named after the margin in Florida for the Bush v. Gore.
Really?
Oh my god.
That's what she said. Yeah,
Oh,
that was
no.
her brilliant take on Nate Silver.
You know, the one thing I have to say one thing that pisses. So I'm gonna both
Just real quick, in case anyone
give
doesn't
Nate
get this
Silver
joke,
credit,
that's the maximum number of
and
electors. Anyway, continue.
I'm gonna give Nate Silver credit, and I'm also going to be like, "What the fuck, dude?" Because on one hand, he's actually trying to. The original setup for 538 was really good, where they were trying to do a politically neutral thing, and then I think it was actually what was that? Silver. Was it Silver? No, not Nate Silver. No, it was one of the climate things. The left just went nuts, so he ended up firing anybody who wasn't a leftist as his response.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
brilliant.
what was it? It was
Friend
that
escapes
guy's
me.
name ends in Junior. He's an economist
Well, I know
who
you're not
was
talking about Dale Earnhardt.
his paper was related to climate damages, and what he found, and the synopsis of his paper was they're saying that we have these record climate damages, and that's true in terms of dollar figures. But what he actually did was when he tied the actual damages to GDP and broke it down as kind of that simple ratio, it was flat. It was actually declining, the actual damage that we were seeing from weather related events. So yes, the actual dollar value was going up, and so the insurance companies were more than happy to blame climate because they were seeking to get like extra money from the United States to pitch in on their claims. But in reality, what it came down to is as a function of GDP, our losses were actually dropping. And whoever that was, he wrote his piece on 538, and then 538 got a ton of backlash from the left. So Nate Silver fired anybody who wasn't far left. And that is like, he's kind of a pussy, but he at least tried to be good. And then my other criticism of him, I guess that's the best I can say about Nate Silver. My other criticism is, in this case,
Not the
right,
highest praise.
not the highest praise. That's probably the best I can do for any left-leaning site. I'm sorry.
Oh, speaking of Nate Silver,
There-
he's apparently very upset that people are still betting on Trump.
well, yeah, he is.
He's like, how is it 10%? It's like, well, there's a chance,
There's
buddy.
this electoral college that hasn't even met yet. But well, we won't worry about that yet.
I think this is the thing, right? Like he tries.
Bless his
He
heart, he
was
tries.
so wrong this election that like he should just take a moment and go cry in the corner, because you cannot fail this much as an academic and believe that anything you have to say has merit. Right? He was off by as much as 20 points in a couple cases.
That was fucking awful. I know. I think it was there was an anchor recently that was like, "Why do we need you?" Or no, it was on the 6th. I think it was on the 6th. But there's it was an anchor on some. It was probably CNN or some shit. And there's I think it was like, I hate so basically a bunch of mealy mouth prefacing, and then, "Why do we need you?"
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, this is just the Bob office space coming back to the roost, man. What you do here?
Just fuck
I
my
used to
shit up,
hate
fam,
Frank
Nate.
Luntz because Frank Luntz was picked on by Penn Jillette in Penn and Teller's Bullshit, which is literally the best show of all time.
Yes.
And anybody who has not seen it, you should just go binge watch every single season, because it has made me who I am today.
Yeah, it's solid stuff, actually. I would recommend it.
It really
Especially
is.
their
It really is. Actually,
gun control is bullshit. That's an excellent one. They really just take it apart nicely.
I think there was actually something that you guys pitched talking about, and they actually covered it as well as possible. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, Penn and Teller's Bullshit is
top notch. That's what you need.
Top notch entertainment, infotainment. Let's call it infotainment.
Fair enough.
But Yeah, so I originally hated Frank Luntz because Penn Jillette hates Frank Luntz, but
I know
I
why.
actually, well, I do too. But I
Yeah.
have come to respect Frank Luntz because he turned around and he said that if we get it wrong this election, considering they've been wrong for this past election, the election before.
Oh, he said obvious shit to save his job. You know it.
Yeah, but I mean, he still turned around and said that we're like the entire field that I work in is in trouble because we've been so consistently wrong. Whereas Nate Silver is sitting there and getting angry with the betting markets. I mean, which is the more appropriate reaction?
Well, come on, you
Well,
do.
actually, to be
Everybody
fair,
likes an old man that yells at clouds.
well, Frank Luntz is basically king of asking the inappropriate question. Well, that's his entire bread and butter is to ask things dishonestly enough to get the results he wants. So
That is true. That is true. But I
that,
mean, that's
that
what he
equals
said on Penn
he's
and
just
Teller's
honest about
bullshit.
it.
He said that I can get
Yeah,
whatever result I want if I ask the question the right way.
yeah. But you see, that's just being honest about his entire industry. Whereas the rest of the pollsters are like, no, we did a representative sample of CNN's audience.
Yes, I actually, well, I mean, and I give him credit, right? Because that's kind of the difference between like that's where the engineers versus the climatologists come in, right there. He's like, yeah,
We're asking all MSNBC viewers to please call in for this important poll.
yes.
Oh god.
Oh my god. But I feel bad. So going back to, I think we left off. We went off a very long tangent away from fraud, but
Yes,
there
we
is
Well,
are.
not
some
really. I
evidence
mean,
of
we're
fraud.
talking about,
There,
polling.
or actually, I don't even know if it's fraud, but impropriety. I think that the fraud, if it is anywhere, is Michigan. That place, holy shit! Have you read some of those affidavits?
Yeah.
There's
So
some astounding stuff, and if any of the whistleblower stuff out of Dominion's to
there.
believed, it's
I'm
a
I'm
shit show.
so ready to you see the thing is I'm not going to be personally injured if it turns out that there's fraud. The people up there who actually allowed this shit to go on, they're in trouble. Like it doesn't matter if Biden wins, you're probably going to have your neck in a bad place, like under a boot or in a rope.
Did you Oh, did you see that one? What was it? It was just a recording of the election officials explaining how to run the election. Did you guys see that one?
I don't think I did.
Not familiar
Oh,
right
it was
offhand.
you know what? I'll dig around and I'll see if I can find it because they actually Michigan ended up launching a cease and desist order against them, but they basically filmed or at least audio recorded the
Yeah,
training sessions for the ballot counters.
Now,
absolutely should happen.
I haven't heard the Bowner. I actually have heard of that, but one I have heard was a training session for the postal carriers and how they were meant to handle Republican ballots that came in as opposed
All that
to.
shit needs to be posted like just on YouTube, constant 24/7 stream. These assholes ought to be under a fucking microscope. There's
Yeah,
no
it
reason to
it
rush
was
down
it
like
was pretty impressive. It
Oh,
was
and a
I'll have to
quick
dig
note,
back through my
actually,
tweets.
since we're on this specific topic, as a matter of fact, earlier today it came out that the Dominion bid for the city of Philadelphia under their Section 9 of the application, please list any foreign ownership or investors in either the
that.
parent company or its subsidiaries, is entirely redacted.
Oh, really? That's
Wait,
great.
say that again?
I'll link it in chat right now, but yeah, basically the entire section on any foreign person that might be involved, completely redacted. There's absolutely nothing there.
Really?
Well, not nothing
Huh.
there. There's a big black block where there would be that information. And it
Oh,
was
that's kinda
submitted in
interesting.
this fashion, from my understanding.
Ha ha ha.
Darn it! I wanted to click on the useless thing.
Wait, no, oh no, the other thing before that? Yeah, that's pretty amazing. If you guys haven't seen that, like I'm very happy to take a deviation from any serious topics, but there is somebody built a working Stargate and it's amazing. I mean, it doesn't have a wormhole, which is the only thing it's missing.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
And I do have one other complaint with it. It is actually not in keeping with the lore because it manually dials the gate, which only needs to happen if it doesn't have a DHD, but clearly this thing has a DHD, so the gate shouldn't be spinning. I'm just throwing that out there as a Stargate fan.
I'm not even
bullshit.
sure what all of that means, but I'm going to take your word for it.
Well, that means you're. Yep. I'm sorry, sir. That means you're 16 seasons and a movie behind.
That is exactly correct.
Sorry, no. Hold on a second. That's 16.
Sorry, he is.
No, you're 17 seasons behind in a movie.
He is 17 seasons and 3 different shows plus a movie behind.
Continuum doesn't count. We're just gonna skip the animated movie.
Yeah, no.
That's like the Mario Brothers movie. It didn't happen.
That's straight to YouTube shit. No, no sir. But if you do not understand it, you just start at season 1 and go forward. It's one of the only sci-fi shows whose budget got better as time went on.
And then it was precipitously wrong with SGU.
You know, I really feel bad about SGU because the premise of SGU was amazing.
No, the worst part was it got good in season 2 after plodding through season 1 with that stupid shit. Then season 2 is great, and then they go, "Oh, we're just gonna abandon it."
Well, you know, I think the problem is that they've already turned off enough viewers by season 2 that they couldn't recover. But if they relaunched SGU with the same premise and the same shit, just like so for viewers, right? For listeners, let's do a brief preview as sci-fi nerds that we are. The reason that SGU failed, SGU is basically they were trapped on a ship, right? An ancient starship that has been traveling multiple galaxies in search of something that we never quite learned about.
Yeah, I think I watched like 4 episodes of that. It seemed like an interesting premise.
It was a really interesting premise. The problem is that if you put a whole bunch of people into life-threatening situations, the first thing that they don't do is try to murder each other and stab each other in the back. But in SGU, that's basically all they did all day long. It was that, and it was like Tinder in space plus backstabbing politics.
Yeah, I got a real.
It was like Grindr in space then.
Yeah.
I would say Grindr, but there was just not enough gayness.
Grindr minus the rainbows. There you go.
Well, it wasn't on MTV, so you know.
Oh my god! But yes, if you don't understand any of what I just said there, you got to start from the beginning. Evan, I mean, come on, man.
Well, no, I have watched a little bit of that. I've watched a little bit of the Stargate Atlantis, which is kind of interesting.
A little bit doesn't cut it, my friend.
So, assuming you've watched the original movie, which would be the second movie that matters. Assuming you watch the first one, just start with season 1 of the show, and go, because they'll cover. And if you don't remember the original movie, you should go watch that first, and then just be upset that Kurt Russell's not in any of the rest of it.
Fair point on that. Yeah. Yeah, MacGyver isn't exactly.
I don't mind. I would rather have Richard Dean
Anderson. I liked him. He was good.
He was excellent.
I was expecting more MacGyver.
He made the character come to life, but like Kurt Russell is just fucking badass in the movie. Like
yes, he is.
Out of it, like the way that they had to tweak the story about him to make it work out in the show, which was a little bit upsetting, but like whatever. The show was really good.
It was pretty amazing. You know what? That thing that I was going to try to find, I think it's been deleted. I think they know shit.
This is why you download anything you look at and you go, "Oh, that's interesting."
Yeah, if it seems interesting, you should probably keep it.
I think I even let me see if I linked it in Craig's thing here. I'm gonna have to actually go back through this whole list. But yes, Stargate is amazing. It is better than Star Trek. It is better than Star Wars. I mean, pretty much everything's better than Star Wars.
Well, now especially.
I mean, honestly, I really struggle with Space Wizards. I really do.
I don't know. Space Wizards are pretty cool, especially in 40K. But that's entirely different.
Nope. They aren't. They're space wizards. It's the fucking neckbeard equivalent of yeah, no. They're just they're poor space wizards. That's what makes it worse. Everybody's poor in Star Wars, right? They have fucking
Star Wars.
hyperdrive and they're fucking subsistence living. All of them.
Okay, well, yeah, kind of.
Oh, look, you spread your resources out over several planets. It kind of takes a bit of time to get some money.
Well, you say that, and then we take
You
a
know.
look at the new series, and they built, without any tax base, mind you, without any tax base, a warp or hyperspace capable planet with a Death Star beam.
Okay, see, I didn't even watch that many of those movies to figure that part out. All I saw was the first one, and then I laughed really hard, and then I stopped watching. And the thing, I watched enough of the second one to watch the only character that mattered die, and then that was it. Oh, no, that was just the first one. Yeah, so it didn't even matter. Like the second one was all just like, why the fuck? Like I wasn't even the one who had the copy at the time. And I was like, why the fuck is this on? I ended up watching it. I said, I want my time back. But now I just have the ability to make fun of it for the rest of my life, I guess. I'm never gonna watch the third one.
There is a few. I've only ever once requested my time back, and yeah, Twitter made it go away. Holy shit!
Of course they did.
I found it on your server. Because I posted it there.
We like it. And
let's see if it's still here. Nope, it's still on there. It just must be. Let's see.
Press print screen.
Nope.
Open up Paint.
It's not. It's not that. It's an audio file, right?
Ah, fuck.
Yeah.
Well, is it? Hold on. Where the? Fuck me. Now I have to go fucking scroll up in this shit. Pardon my French.
No worries. So, in the meanwhile, while you're actually looking that up, I've got another article I'm going to quickly discuss because I actually know most of the pertinent information, and you guys can just comment.
Oh.
So, I've got it linked in the chat here, right above the Stargate. But it's about hunting with lead ammunition and its danger to humans and animals.
So oddly enough, Craig and I actually had this debate.
We had a discussion about it, yeah.
All right, well, go on.
Well,
I've actually seen I've seen some good studies on it, but please add your thoughts.
So we're actually opposed on this. Well, sort of. We have a general agreement on the premise, right? Which is that we don't want to dump lead into the environment, right? Yeah. My belief is that putting a ban on lead is the best way to do that, and Craig's belief is that there's got to be another way to do it. But actually, one of the problems that you have, and ultimately when it comes to me and my environmental perspective on regulation, the only time that I'm going to turn around and say that we should ban something, block something, or regulate something is really going to come down to heavy metals. And that is because almost everything else can be dealt with in a variety of chemical or biological solutions to remedy the problem. But when you start talking about heavy metals, you just can't get rid of it. It's an elemental hazard, and the only way to deal with an elemental hazard and get rid of the elemental hazard is to transmute it, which we can only do with a very high intensity neutron beam, and that's not really a good way of remediating the environment. So my view is it's better to just keep it out of that. I understand that it has industrial applications, but I would actually be okay with heavily regulating it. And Craig believes that there's got to be another way.
Well, I can actually add something to that because I've seen some of the studies on this. I'll have to look them up, and if I can, I'll link some.
We were talking about fishing weights at the time, mind you.
We were talking about fishing weights, but
the premise is fishing weights, not bullets. But the general premise still holds.
Yes.
And we agree on the facts here. There's lead, like iron, will flake under oxidation, and so you get it fresh exposure, fresh oxidation. The cycle continues. Lead oxide is not very soluble, but it is soluble to an extent. It can be picked up and eaten on surfaces. So it's not going to just stay in the bulk metal, generally, if you provide a fresh lump of it to a whole bunch of salt water. If you, say, missed a buck and you hit a tree, you're probably not going to poison much of the environment besides the one tree. And if the tree dies, it rots, the lead goes into the ground, continues going deeper into the ground. Not a big thing. If you have a whole bunch of bullets, you're starting to get a little more of a problem. Where I have a major issue is with things like leaded gasoline, where you are literally pumping the fucking oxide into the air and
Oh yeah, lead gas.
spreading it over the entire surface of the country.
If you had brought up lead gas, I'd be kind of okay with that. Ultimately, I think that there's other compounds that we can use that don't introduce the problem. But this really, so one of the things that chemical engineers are I don't know if we're taught. It's like, your professor will say it to you in the darkened shadows, and that is of the modern academia, because at least in my program we were paired off with environmental engineers, and if you even mentioned such a thing, it was cause for pitchforks, and that is dilution is the solution to pollution.
Yes.
And it's true, right? This is why when we start talking about big cities, right, New York, I actually entirely understand why the citizens of New York City want heavy regulations on a whole bunch of environmental problems, because if you drive down there, it's a fucking shithole. And the reason it's a shithole is because they have so many people and so many emissions in such a tight space, it doesn't have any room to settle out, and so it just builds up and basically fucks everybody over. But what to Craig's point, and where I'd agree with him, you start taking this nationwide, and it's not really a huge deal because it's a very small amount that is distributed over the entire landmass.
My point was that tetraethyl lead was a huge problem, and I'm glad it's gone. The main problem was that it was spraying out lead oxide into the air, which settled on the ground. The big difference between the ground and the air is that there's not nearly as much ground as there is air. So the whole dilution aspect of it is lost, because by several orders of magnitude,
it still dilutes, though.
But by several orders of magnitude, it is now concentrated relative to where it was originated as a particulate in the air. So it is on surfaces everywhere as a background contaminant. That is a major hazard.
Well, I have an interesting anecdote for you regarding that specifically. South American chocolate, up until relatively recently, was notably higher in lead than European chocolates, because they use leaded gasoline for the longest time.
But probably also use some leaded utensils to do some of the work on it.
Possibly so, but most of that was from lead in the air.
Yeah, I believe it.
Same with Chinese chocolate that you'll find right now.
Well, that's a whole different story.
Oh yeah, there's a whole lot more.
You also might find melamine in your chocolate.
I mean, what was
maybe even some fentanyl.
Maybe people have forgotten, but I distinctly remember being in like elementary school and high school, and every single year there was a Christmas gift that got recalled because China put something in it that shouldn't be. And like little kids would lick it, and some of them would die or get high or whatever the fuck it was.
What about the melamine was that it was in baby food. Like, what the fuck is that doing there? It's a goddamn polymer precursor that's very toxic.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, there's kind of a lot of that these days. It's really something when you've got to let your new purchases off gas for a month.
Oh, all right. 1 second. I gotta take a girlfriend break.
Yeah, no problem. Actually, and I was going to discuss this specifically too, from my point of view, on the lead in game, at least. Using lead shot and bullets specifically. What a lot of what this specific study found is that if this is ingested by further game down the line, it can go on down like rat poison into rats, into cats, into other things. But a lot of it, when it's done properly by humans, in a thoughtful and generally humanitarian way, like hunting generally is, then what'll happen is it comes to the human finds the thing in there during the butchering process, or later on during the cooking, or further still, when it actually gets to you. The things never get hot enough for it to dissolve into the flesh, so, you bite down on something a little hard and just spit it out. And also, where it is in such a strong form, your body doesn't do much digesting in the very off chance that you do miss it.
Hmm.
So,
I
in this specific instance, it's actually kind of an overblown thing, a lot like how anthropogenic climate change is really
so
a big thing.
so I hear those kinds of things, and ultimately, a lot of times when we start talking about environmental issues, I totally agree. They're largely overblown. The problem is that when we start talking about elemental hazards such as lead, it doesn't go away and it doesn't break down, and there's nothing you can do. And so ultimately, we should take those hazards out early from the entire chain and minimize the damage, because otherwise they'll build up. And as we grow as a population, as we expand out as a species, what we're going to end up doing if we do not de-lead our stuff is we'll end up, kind of ultra concentrating it in certain regions. And, even if it's not a problem immediately today, it will be a problem over time. There's no way to get rid of it. And that's kind of the issue. So for me, and this could be a bias on my part, right? I actually grew up in Marblehead, Mass, and Marblehead, Mass, for many people who don't know, is basically where all the rich people live. Like anybody who, if you got a stockbroker that's got, like, you're using Merrill Lynch or something like that, well, those people actually lived in Marblehead, and they lived on a portion called the Neck. It's filled with castles. But what a lot of people don't know is that Marblehead borders Salem, Mass. Yes, the witch trials and all that stuff. And right there is Salem Harbor, and there's an estuary there, which is where I did my Eagle Scout project. And the problem that you have is they wanted to expand the harbor or put in condominiums or whatever else have you, but in that whole entire area, they had actually previously had a lead works, and that was back in like 1800s, 1900s. And the problem that you have is that if you want to build anything in that region, which is, for we're talking about heavily populated land, is extremely valuable, houses are extremely valuable, beachfront property doubly so, oceanfront property triply so, right? um, and all of a sudden you have this large swath of land that you can't get into, because if you dig anything up, and I mean anything up, right, it just, you're basically going to create a massive lead hazard for everybody there. So for me and my perspective, it's a problem that just doesn't go away, uh, and you probably shouldn't engage in it, regardless of whether or not it's overblown now. As we grow and develop as a society, we will constrict the spaces in which the hunting will occur more and more often. So it's not a problem today, but it will be a problem in the future. And we don't want that.
Well, that's a fair point. But, a good hunter that is a good steward is not going to be a part of that problem. But then, as with anything, a person who is a good steward of what they're dealing with isn't really going to be a problem, because they moderate their own damage and
And that's
oftentimes mitigate their own damage and, undo a lot of that, make more fixes happen than breaks, as it were.
and I totally agree with that, right? So I'm not a hunter. I actually, as much as I tend to be a conservative here, I am probably the most liberal amongst you. I am, of all of us, the least likely to own a gun. I happen to know people who own guns, and that's good enough for me.
Well, you've got a
They're an
3D printer, right?
I do have a 3D printer,
Good
so I
enough.
can
Then there
own a
you
gun
go.
if
That's
need
all you
be.
need.
But I have a friend response team that's always within 5 minutes or less. So
Yeah, the
they
3D
can beat
printer
the
would
cops if I
take
really need
you
them.
about 72-ish hours
Yeah.
to have, and
but it's not an issue with
FPC9.
guns. It's for me, it's more or less that it's an expense that I don't need, right? And when it comes to environmental issues, I understand where regulation. I work in regulatory compliance on a regular basis. Anybody in the nuclear field does. It is overbearing in certain areas, and there's absolutely places that we should do it. And when we start talking about people who are hunters, those folks are the stewards of the environment. We try to go camping, and it's all these new fucking millennials that are shitting the place up. Literally, they're leaving like shit rags and shit buckets and stuff like that at campsites where I used to hang out.
San Francisco.
You got back just in time for the shit bucket.
It is just like San Francisco. So I totally believe that when we start talking about the people who are conserving nature, it tends to be conservatives, it tends to be the hunters. I'm not in that role, and I totally support them and believe that game licenses, fishing licenses, all of those things, restocking our streams, we end up significantly improving our environment as long as we are actively using it, because we need to manage it. But and here's the but: when it comes to elemental hazards such as lead, or I'd extend the same thing to mercury, I would much rather turn around and provide the option of, say, steel shot for your shotgun, which is not a hazard in any way, shape, or form, than lead shot.
No, fair.
Regardless of what it is, and the price difference is not going to be huge.
Here's the part where you're going to have a problem: is providing bullets that are capable of firing down a rifled channel.
Steel shot only works for an unrifled shotgun.
Being impressioned and grooved, and coming out the other end, and then especially for, say, something that is designed to be necessarily deformable, something that will also deform in a way that is similarly effective to lead, say for a hollow point.
Now, that being said, I am working on my own personal solution to this, which we've discussed some time ago. And
the bullets you DM me about fucking years ago now.
Yeah, it's been a while. I haven't really made any progress, but the idea is sound, so we'll see if I can get that off the ground.
There are.
What is the idea? I know nothing about this.
This
could be interesting.
Shortly, iron bullets.
Yeah, I'd support that.
So for example, there are copper fletcheted rounds, kind of like they are distinctly hollow points, and they're designed to burst apart and have greater area of effect, if you will. And there's similar, so copper is a great example of a metal that you could use for a bullet that would probably still be similarly effective. It's just more expensive.
No, there are some designs that are actually more effective because. Well, there's a lot that's been done with bullet design, even in just the past few years. There are some
also very much more ductile than lead.
Yeah. So there's a design that's shaped basically like the head of a screwdriver, and it does amazing things. It penetrates incredibly well and has performance similar to a hollow point as far as energy dissipation. It's Barnes Bullets designed it, and it's a hell of a thing. It's a hell of a thing. Let me see. I'll see if I can get you a picture of this thing.
Oh, so speaking of conservation, I thought I'd bring up a funny one for all the conservation nuts who don't actually do any of the actual conserving of the populations, any stewardship. The hogs in Texas are a fantastic example. It's a hilarious example. The liberals are showing up now and just starting to get into protesting the hunting of wild hogs and wild boar. These fuckers will show up at your house and will chew your leg off. And then all their other little boarlings will come along and finish you off. And they destroy pets. They kill a lot of pets. Wild boar, as a population, require, at this point, there's no doubt about it, they require human intervention to be kept under control to prevent population boom and thus a mass die-off. So better kill a few with boar hunts than to allow boars to have a massive population swell over, say, 2 or 3 years, and then have a mass die-off of many other species, let alone the boar.
Well, they're an invasive species, to put it simply.
I don't know.
Well, I
Yes,
mean, you want to talk about...
You might have a population boom is all.
Here we go. I
Oh,
finally found it.
Creatures. They're very smart. They're very strong. They're not like pigs in a farm. These are like, think Pumbaa from Lion King. They're intelligent, vicious animals when they need to be vicious. They're not like outright looking for humans, but they have
what?
to come into human population areas. There's got to be interaction.
Why is it that you're referencing Texas here when that's a problem for Florida? I see what you're doing. You're just sitting there and being like, look, we need to sit there.
There's been not the area I'm living in right now. A few years back, they had a boar hunt in this area.
Yeah.
Wild boar is a problem down here too. It's not as bad because we, generally speaking, just kill them and eat them.
Well, as I remember it, you actually get paid per boar that you kill in a lot of these states.
So I'm living actually in a bird sanctuary. It was the coolest thing. They came in with crossbows, and a big part of their payment was the boar meat they got.
Really? I thought that there was actually like a. I could have sworn that I've seen that in some of these places with boar, because boar are a problem, they actually get paid to eliminate them. In much the same way that Mississippi, when you look at like.
They came with crossbows, and they got paid, but they also got to keep everything they killed.
Right.
And so, from what I understand in Texas, you're basically completely just out in the open. If you see a wild boar, you're good to take it as long as you're not in city limits, basically.
Yeah, so like I'm in a bird sanctuary, so they couldn't use guns is the big thing. But right. They would root around. They destroyed garden after garden. There are pets that were not so happy after the boar pack got done with them.
And I've linked
the ones that were still around, I should say. So basically, they weren't good news, and I think there was like 10 or 20 of them. And they are pack hunters, and they are pack animals.
Oh yeah, they can absolutely devastate smaller wildlife too, like birds. Yeah. Pets, for that matter, are very much in danger. Oh, but I linked in chat there those new bullet designs. There's actually an iteration now that's got a bit of an extra cut in the center. That
Defense. Hold on a second. Why do I recognize that name?
They've been around for some while.
Yeah, I have seen these.
Yeah, they function like a beast. They're not cheap, and they are solid copper, but man, they work.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically think Phillips head screwdriver design.
More or less, yeah.
Well, did you guys see the varmint round? Varmint grenade.
Oh yeah, those are frangible. Actually, they basically explode on. To put it simply, they explode on impact. A lot of them, I believe, are frangible copper.
They are the funniest thing. They are designed to liquefy whatever they hit. So your pelt only has an inlet wound and an outlet wound, and everything else is just goo. Oh. So it gooifies the internals of your gopher.
In addition to that, those are actually used in.
Like a fucking rocket.
A lot of those are used in training too, because they're very safe. You don't get any ricochet or anything. So if you're doing like house cleaning exercises, they use those in like professional settings.
The varmint grenades?
Same style of bullet, but yes.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the actual projectile piece itself is of the same design.
Huh.
Because that's imagine, I mean, if it explodes like that, and you're going through close quarters, it's not going to be as dangerous to you as something actually ricocheting back and hitting you from a foot away.
Huh. I remember coming across the varmint grenade I think before I was actually like swayed away from the liberal side, and I was like, that was the first time I realized that bullet design actually matters.
Oh yeah, it's really something. I mean, ballistics.
Speaking speaking as somebody
functionality
who
was
has
cool.
made their transition successfully,
Military.com. PETA must hate this varmint grenade.
There you go. I'll have a link to that, by the way, and as well to the.
it's pretty amazing, isn't it? But I was absolutely shocked, and so like I just met one of my friends who is a hunting enthusiast, and actually I really wish I knew more hunters, because that way they're really great to bum meat off of, because oh my god, I love game meat. I actually really like game meat. I know some people don't like it, but big fan. And he said, oh yeah, that's like bullet design absolutely matters when you start going after whatever you're going after, because A, you want to kill it on one shot because you don't want it to suffer, and B, depending on what you're looking for trophy wise or meat wise, you want to make sure it works out right.
What you want to do is use a 50 cal on a squirrel, and make sure you use the green tips. You don't want anything to stop that bullet.
There you go. Yeah, problem solved.
Go full on, get the NATO rounds, man. Just steel core right through the fucker.
Yeah, but I mean, if you shoot a 50 cal at a squirrel, right, you don't have to hit the squirrel. The
No, you
sonic
just aim in
boom
the
will
vicinity of the squirrel, and you're pretty
eliminate
good.
this.
Oh, rip the fur right off the fucker. Yes.
So a well-aimed shot with a 50 cal at a squirrel could actually make your whole job of getting the meat easier. You're just gonna have to be really careful to miss.
I remember the what was it, when you play Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 and you sneak through all of like Soviet Russia or whatever in a ghillie suit, and you end up like shooting at the dude, and I'm like, why the hell did it blow its arm off, right? Because you can never kill him. You can never kill him in that. I tried at least 30 times to kill that dude before I realized the game doesn't allow that.
Yeah.
And you're wondering why the arm blows off. And the answer is that if you're like within 5 feet of that bullet's trajectory on either side, you go missing limbs.
Well, that's not exactly accurate, but it does make for a good picture. It's like getting knocked back with a shotgun blast. It doesn't
Holy
really happen that way, but
2 grain varmint grenade. What the fuck? This thing looks like it's used in Germany in a certain industry.
who knows?
What industry would that be?
A particular one. Hold on a second. Let me pull the picture. I'll put it in chat. Windows. There we go. This one right here. That's a varmint grenade, apparently. Not a other type of tool.
Wow, that's a nasty-looking projectile.
Yeah, like I'm having trouble understanding why it needed to be shaped quite like that. I mean, just the aerodynamics has been completely sacrificed for the sake of more powder here, when you could just elongate the bullet a little bit.
More mass equals more stopping.
Yeah, aerodynamics has a little role to play here.
More equals more better.
I suppose if you're like a foot away from the varmint, you shoot it with this thing, it's probably not going to make much of a difference.
I think that's kind of the idea. Like, goodbye, varmints. We'll have no more of you here.
6mm, .243, 62 grain. Holy shit.
Yeah,
we have actual we have actual groundhogs here in on the site at the nuclear lab, and it is so safe for them that they live within the confines and have absolutely zero fear. It's the funniest fucking thing, right? Because all the predators are too big to get through the fence.
That's chipmunks at the national parks. Completely. You show up at like Yosemite, or you go over to Rushmore, any of that kind of shit. Any of the national parks, you show up very clearly. Do not feed the animals. Hey,
Yep.
look, there's the animal, and there's the food.
A couple of years ago,
sign and then put the food down.
A couple of years ago, they so we have this area, right, and it's been contaminated, and you guys can go check the event or whatever, but it's a really large surface area. They were doing so Carter back in the 1970s, late 1978. We were actually researching the same way that France handles its spent fuel. We were looking at how to reprocess it, to reclaim it, because again, something like 95% of the fuel that we use is usable by the time we're done with our reactors. So they were actually doing something called, just a separations process, right? And so this one unit in 1978, where right where I'm working, Carter issued an order saying we're no longer going to even bother attempting to process our waste. We're just going to bury it in a hole. And so they got shut down in a day. And so they left their entire site just with everything there. So the folks who were going in and doing the demolition and trying to like reclaim the land, it was like coffee cups. Now, they were also probably they were just super contaminated. They just, back in the day, we didn't do anything with contamination control. We had nothing at all. And you sit there and you dive into this, and while they were cleaning up the site, they found one of these tanks where they were doing the separations process and trying to like finite it. Well, they put one of those big old tank grippers on it, and the guy crushed the tank.
No. And it went everywhere, didn't it? Oh.
It went everywhere. Like, we're talking about massive Curie content spread out over a huge area. So
beer canned it? Why?
Oh, they beer canned it, right? I
man.
think it was by accident, or they thought it was empty, but it wasn't. It was a slurry at the bottom of the thing, and it was like it really screwed us over because we have limits that are tighter than what like the DOE or NRC has because we want to self-regulate. We don't want to be controlled by we don't want anybody looking over our shoulder, which makes sense.
So you just deal with tighter limits, and then you're fine. The problem is then you have to deal with shit like this.
Right, exactly. So somebody fucked up, and so now we have all these other RADCON concerns. But there's this huge area, right? And it used to be a stairway that would go from the upper site to the lower site, and that whole area just got contaminated. Well, nuclear waste is not as hazardous as we pretend it is. And to give you guys an idea, there was a family of foxes that or there was a fox that gave birth and had a family of foxes on the other side of the fence. And so tying this back into your like don't feed the squirrels and the thing, they ended up at some point creating a gigantic like police area do not cross about 10 to 15 feet away from the fence because people would take their lunch at the lab, they'd walk up to the fence and throw it over to the baby foxes.
Yeah, don't do this, people. It is. It really
had to
messes up.
Put a 20-foot barrier, so
things.
if you really wanted to feed the foxes your sandwich, you had to chuck it really freaking hard. But I have crows that have actually decided to challenge me for turf, and you're like, seriously, buddy? I'm like 10 times your size. What the fuck's wrong with you?
Yeah, crows can be pretty awesome, actually, though. Do what you can to be bros with crows, because they're going to stick around anyway. So, always better to have an army of crow friends.
Also, that bullet you linked, I just sat down after making myself some popcorn. I think it looks like a butt plug.
Oh, that thing? Yeah, kind of.
It really does. It's even got the grooves to make sure it nests right at the spot.
Either that or a cleaning utensil.
Yeah.
It's a convenient somewhere in between. Usable for all occasions.
Well, in some other news that's not horrifying, today... Oh, no.
Yeah, push forward to
audio.
space.
There we go. What happened is the SpaceX launch got delayed. It was supposed to go down yesterday, but instead went down today. And so
why?
it went down without any issues. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
What happened?
Why it got delayed? Because they needed an excuse for 4 women to work on it. I'm bullshitting here. But so they had
Clearly.
They had 4 female engineers come out there and fix it, which just by happenstance. It's the same way I see the other headlines. The only reason I know this is because they were female. And thus everybody had to talk about that, not, it's delayed for an actual reason.
Oh, on that same note, I saw an article saying something about this being like the first black astronaut going up. They don't even bother to say his name, I think, in the article or anything about him. Just like, oh yeah, no, it's finally happened. We've defeated racism again for the first time again.
No, he's the first one on the International Space Station. What they neglected to mention was anything about his mission, anything about his actual achievements, his background. As far as they're concerned, he won the fucking lottery because he was born black. Like, what the fuck? I just hope he's ignoring all the headlines, and I'm sure he's going to space, so I'm sure he's got better shit to think about. And I'm sure he's gonna have a great time up there because fucking space. So I'm sure he's gonna have fun and he's gonna have plenty of success. But
I
just
don't know
pointing
if
out that he's
space
black
would
and like
be that
stopping
cool.
there, it's just.
Nah, space is pretty dope.
But like pointing out that he's black and then stopping there, and saying this is that's the most important thing about the guy. That's the part you're putting in the headline. Not
Yeah,
like any of the cool
kind of
shit he's gonna
racist,
do,
fam.
has on. I think it's disgusting to do that kind of shit. So shame on the New York Times for fucking pointing that shit out as their lead and then holding it.
I think the record for like pissing me off for social justice shit is held by the guy who managed to land a satellite on a comet moving in space or an asteroid or whatever it is, and then getting raked over the coals because of the shirt that he wore.
I actually got that fucking shirt. I got a couple of them. His
pretty
female
dope
friend
shirt.
designed the shirt for him, the Shirt Storm shirt, and she was upset because they made him fucking cry on TV, apologizing.
Yeah, a man who landed
again,
a satellite on an asteroid, traveling at a ridiculous rate of speed.
Incredibly difficult feat, mind you. But this again highlights the difference between engineers and scientists. Scientists will cry like little babies, where engineers will beat you with your own incompetence until such time as you give us what we fucking want.
Look, the beatings will continue until morale improves.
I have to say, I don't understand why you still stick in university, because it is so much more fun when you go out in the outside world.
Oh, I'm so close to being done.
I love my job. My job is literally getting to sit there and say, I told you so all day long, which is probably in the top, 2 things of me doing every day.
Right?
Look, and the second part of my job is literally beating everybody over the head with their own incompetence, which is at least in the top 2 things that I do. So I get to do the 2 things that I love doing the most every day, and I get paid insane money.
Look, sorry, as a friend, I gotta give you the warning here, though. Your palms are gonna get fuzzy, and you're gonna go blind if you keep this up.
Yeah, so maybe not the best idea then.
Wait, what? Is that a masturbation joke?
Yes, it was.
Listen, I love it. I love it. It's delicious and fun. Self-gratification is okay.
No, that's what I tell people though. Is I wouldn't do what I do if I didn't love to do it. Except for the part here at the end where I have to fucking write about everything. Everything else.
Paperwork is the only dull part of the job.
Right. Now, I have to do it because I can't go around and just tell people about what I've done for the rest of my life. I'd rather have a document somewhere. If I can only get 7.5 billion people to come to my talk, not gonna happen.
Now, speaking of large numbers, I'm gonna link something in chat for you guys that's probably not gonna surprise you a single bit, but it's kind of out in the open now.
Uh-huh.
Facebook using AI to stem dangerous and false posts.
Yeah.
Which we've kind of all known. I mean, that there's algorithms and AI doing the censoring in the background, but it's nice to at least have it out in the open now.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I think it kind of makes me sad because Facebook was like Twitter. Jack Dorsey is a fucking cunt who turns around and he gets in front of Congress and he's just a moron. And I understand that, when we start talking about this stuff, it's it really is for the folks that are attempting to get true righteous information. It's between a rock and a hard place, right? on one hand, you have one group of people which are saying censor everything that we disagree with. And on the other hand, you have some people who are diving into crazy conspiracies.
Oh,
And that means
they say that they want everyone else to be censored too. That's just
yes.
believe it or not. Once they finally get any traction, it ends there anyway.
Yes. But it's just, I kind of feel bad for Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff, in the sense that that's a tough position. That's a tough line to straddle. On the other hand, don't be a fucking cunt about it.
It's not all that hard a line to straddle, if we're being completely honest. If they were doing things as they ought to be done,
but look at the people they put in charge of trust and safety, for example, on Twitter.
Indeed do.
Dell, whatever the fuck her name is. Like, just people like that who will go out to people, of all people, fucking Anita Sarkeesian and ask for help. Or the laundry list of social rejects they had in the hallway there, that one photo. Like, they bring these people in to basically complain to them about how they aren't able to censor all the people who disagree with them. And then they go out there and they say, for your safety, we're going to start implementing insert a bullshit regulation right here and there. It's asinine. And then they come back and say, well, it's because we want to get rid of Chinese bots or shit like that. It's
funny
bullshit.
Enough, the bots still remain, but the independent thought goes
they
the way
outright
of the dodo.
fail. And here's the thing, I wouldn't call it malice. I think it's just ideological blinders. And they outright fail their objectives as claimed. And then they turn around and say, oh, but we were successful because collateral damage.
Well, I think this really, like, if you want to talk about where the problem we have today in society is ultimately, and why it's going to get worse, by the way, the left for a very long time had an intellectual superiority. And they really did. Like, they were on the ball with most of these arguments. They debated people. They knocked them down. They batted them down. And then they stopped the debate. And because of that
confirmation bias, I think it was 2014, a study came out that said the intelligent people are no longer on the left. So there is documented hard data on this.
They used to be. They used to be. They really did. They used to be absolutely on the ball. 2004, I supported most of the political positions of the Democratic Party. That was where I was. And if they brought that back, I'd be okay with it. But then they just dove off this cliff where they're no longer challenging people. They're no longer sitting there and so what ends up happening is they're caught between this place where there is actual disinformation. We've talked a little bit about it with the election stuff, right?
Everybody out there claiming fraud right now as if it's a hard factual thing with bullshit like the Benford's Law.
Right. Exactly. That's a perfect example. So there's bullshit like that, but they have lost, intellect is a muscle and you have to exercise it. And if you choose to not debate your opponents forever, eventually you're just not going to be capable of debating your opponents. And that's what's happened.
Here's the thing. They haven't realized that. And this is something that a lot of people on the right don't realize either. They, just because you can just shout MAGA and have a bunch of people hang out around you and pat you on the back. So in either camp here, either as you go further away from the center, and the center's got enough of this shit too, but towards the center, you're going to find more people who are willing to have debate, and that's really where you want to be, because if you have somebody who is going to credulously debate you, so debate you as if you believe what you're saying,
or at the very least in good faith,
your arguments credulously, as in accepting as fact certain bases and then arguing the merit of the consequences, that is doing you a favor, because every argument you push forward, if you are compelled to rationalize it and explain it, you now have a much better foundation upon which you can defend it. And if somebody is willing to do you that favor of attacking your ideas, then you should be thanking them for helping you to explain yourself better. This is one of the reasons why when I have somebody come into my, or even you, Steve, you come in, you'll just attack me on shit. What you're really doing is attacking the arguments, not me.
Right.
But the most important thing is
you're a giant pussy, so whatever.
So you're doing me a favor when you come in and act like a little bitch. much as other people on Twitter come in and do the same thing to me, which I'm eternally grateful for that kind of comeuppance, if you will, for my otherwise snide remarks.
Well, I mean, the problem is, and I've gotten it to this point. I do understand where it comes from, because I've gotten to this point too, right? There's definitely certain things when it comes to like wind and solar that as soon as these people start walking down this path, I just mute them because they're fucking retarded, right? They start saying, "Oh yeah, wind and solar is cheaper." All right, you're too dumb to understand what an LCOE actually says, or what lifespan costs are, or literally any of their analytical methods that we do
The
to
one I
calculate.
love is electric vehicles, where 3/4 of the CO2 it's ever going to expend to come before it hits the road, whereas for an ice it's about half. And of course, an ice for apples to apples comparison lasts 10 years instead of 5, for the same amount of CO2 emissions in total. So like shit, like little details like that, and then of course there's where all the electricity comes from.
Right.
Oh, the electricity just gets magicked into the world. What are you talking about?
For the fact that windmills cost a shit fuck ton of CO2 credits, if you will, just to make all that metal and put it together.
Well,
Well, the
yeah, but
stuff
I
that
mean, you
really
can pay
pisses
off
me
Al
off is
Gore
the
and then
people who
buy
go,
some
"Oh
extra
look,
ones, so it's fine.
this is the cheapest thing," and they always fucking cite Lazard, which first off, Lazard is a business thing, and they cite it saying, "Hey, if you could sell all of your power, right, and these were the minimum costs associated with that, that would be great." But the problem is that power is priced based on the actual supply versus demand at that moment, which means that if there's a shitload of fucking solar panels, that doesn't mean it's the cheapest price of power. Because ultimately, the price of power at that moment is going to be so low that you're not going to be profitable. Now, granted, your gas turbine in that moment won't be profitable, but it'll be hella profitable as soon as the sun goes down and you can't actually generate anything from all those solar panels. So basically, you just end up fucking everybody over. And this is the shit that pisses me off. So I do mute those people, and I understand where the left comes from, saying, "Hey, I don't want to debate, racism." Right? That's a reasonable position to take. Like,
Well, but when you point your finger and at the end of your finger is a silhouette of a racist, and you just cover whoever you don't like with it, like
yes,
just shut the fuck up at that point. You're not
right,
actually making an
exactly.
argument. You're just shrieking.
Well,
And
I
that's
heard it.
that's
I
kind
heard
of
a
the
really
problem.
good descriptor of that. I think it was Gavin McInnes. Once upon a time, called it Nazi glasses. You put them on, and you can not see, or everything you see is Nazi.
Cute.
Yeah, he is cute. He's very cute.
Actually, Gavin McGinnis is actually pretty like here, let me see if I can
Laid
find
back
it.
dude.
I actually really respect him. Like, absolutely, he's an agitator, right? That's
Oh yeah.
that's like, I don't think anybody's gonna
Oh
disagree
come
with
on!
that.
When he went on to that, I can't remember which show it was, like whatever show it was. When he went on there with that fucking feminist, he just tells her you'd be much happier at home with kids, and she just had that face, like all of my So you're just rejecting the entirety of my life.
That is a
Like, oh,
fine look. If
yes.
you ever get a chance to get that look, remember it because it's really something special.
I'm telling you, Craig, leave university, join me in the real world, because you
I'm
get that
almost
face
I'm
all the
almost
time.
done, man. I'm almost no. I get that shit enough as it is. Like I'm almost done. The fun one is
It
undergrads.
is
If
it
you ever grade them, and they come to you and they have that face, like, "What do you mean I had to do homework?" It's like, look, man, I'm so there with you, but you did fuck up.
Oh, speaking of which, right? So my professor actually turned around when I remember when I told you I bitched at my professor because he
Right?
fucking took off points, and then
Yeah.
I told him his book was wrong and then like
Yeah.
all this other shit.
Then
Yeah,
he comes crawling back.
he ended up conceding that his book was wrong.
Good.
Oh
No,
well,
And
I was like
kudos.
this in fucking high school. I was got a 98 on a chemistry test. And I went up and I pointed out how I was actually correct with my answer because the question was wrong. And he said, "Oh, get out of here. It's 2 points."
I did that too. Oh my god. I
But
had a
this guy had previously worked with my dad, so he knew who I was, and he just decided to give me shit for it anyway. I thought it was
so
funny.
so I had this chemistry teacher. You know, educators are educators, right? And they do actually take like a passionate a passionate path. They're very invested. The people who really want to be teachers actually really want to be teachers, and they're constantly trying to like improve the learning experience for kids. So my chemistry teacher had tried to come up with a faster shorthand of your SPDF, of your shell, your Vesper theory stuff, right? And so she posed a question, and she taught us all of her brilliant method of how this shit worked, which was, what is element number 92, non-ionized or whatever, which obviously, or whatever the thing is. And I knew what her method was, but I also knew it was wrong because the answer was fucking uranium. And I lost 5 goddamn points on that thing. And I said, this is bullshit. And I went to her. Then I grabbed somebody else who was like a science tutor at the school, like an actually employed science tutor at the school. I said, this is bullshit. And he went. We almost got the principal involved, but she just wouldn't concede that she was her little method that she'd come up with was fucking bullshit and wrong.
Whoops.
Oh, well.
No, my favorite was later on with transition metals in Inorgo.
Oh, yeah.
Everything is in solution and everything has no valence. Just forget them.
I think you guys are getting a little bit too deep in the weeds in the high-end science, because I'm completely lost at this point.
So Evan, you remember how all the elements are like happy with 8 electrons in their outer shell?
Yeah, okay.
Kinda. There's an 18 electron rule for the transition metals. But the thing you have to remember with the transition metals when you start talking about them, and with it's inorganic chemistry, is basically the chemistry of the rest of the periodic table besides carbon.
Yes.
Is the subject matter. So one of the things you have to recall is that everything, when you start talking about it in terms of like, say, if you're talking about ligands, so other things that attach to the atom to when it's, say, dissolved, it's in solution. So it's missing its valence electrons already. And that's a major hiccup that a lot of students have when you start counting up to 18 to see if you got like a stable configuration for your LUMO HOMO thing. So don't worry about that. So basically, to see if it's happy, like with the octet rule. And people start coming up to like, oh, but I didn't, I got 20 or I got 16. It's like, oh, dumbass. The electrons are gone because it's literally dissolved. It's not it's not just the element hanging out as an atom. Little things like details.
So when I said SPDF, right, and with what Craig said is the 8 electrons. Your S and P is your 8 electrons. That's basically 99-ish, probably 99.9. There's probably about as many bonding cases as there are people who fit the gender binary, right? There's only a handful of cases that do not fall outside of an S and a P bond, right? They do exist, and they tend to be with the transition metals, and it tends to be really weird, and nobody talks about it.
If you read the literature, you'd think that they are much more prevalent than they are. But that's only because they're really interesting.
Oh, so kind of like what happened with the DSM-6.
Sulfuric acid is a great example of dehybridization in order to get to the octet. Just throwing that out there already.
Yep.
But
basically,
it's things like that.
When you start talking about it, so when I say SPDF stuff, right? S and P shells are your 8 electrons, and then you have your D and your F shells. And your D shell is like the middle of the periodic table, and your F shell is that little bar of two sets of atoms on the bottom. And that's really what those two things are. And those two can participate in bonding very, very rarely, extremely rarely.
You'll usually find F participating in hybridization when you start looking at surface defects for catalysis. But usually, otherwise, you're not going to find a whole lot of that. And the only other kind of, so I can't remember what the hell letter they use the Greek letter for it. So they use the Greek letter variant of the English letter when you start talking about bonding. So 2 s orbitals overlapping gives you a sigma bond. Then you have pi, then you have delta, and then I can't. Is it phi bond? I can't fucking remember.
It'll be phi. Yep.
Okay, so So then you have we talked about this before, and you were kind of flabbergasted that it was the thing. there's actually there has in literature. It wasn't that long ago. So when I say it wasn't that long ago, I was an undergrad when I saw it. So this somewhere between 2006 and 2011. There was actually, I believe, I'm pretty sure it was ruthenium. There's a quad bond between two metal atoms, and it was basically that's not something you're just generally supposed to see happen.
Right.
Ever.
Right. So they would teach us about your sigma and your pi bonds.
Right.
And then they started doing whatever the other one was. And I think you're right. I think it was ruthenium. And they were super excited because now all of a sudden there was more bonds than the 8.
Yay! You can have quad bonds. Well, how did you do it? We jammed a couple atoms into this giant sterically hindered mess, and they couldn't get out, so they bonded.
Sounds pretty anomalous, I guess.
Well, so
it's extremely anomalous. It never happens.
Yeah,
so nitrogen's
something
very,
you'd
very
kind of have to
stable
force,
and has a
I
triple
guess.
bond. The diatomic nitrogen in air is very stable because it has a triple bond between the atoms. It's very, very strongly held together. A quadruple bond, these atoms are very, very close together. And the amount of energy that it was released to create those 4 bonds was enormous relative to the masses involved. So breaking those bonds apart would require a lot of energy. The fact remained, however, that because they were crammed so close together, they were electrostatically repelling each other with a shit ton of energy. So the only reason they were even able to make that bond was because the rest of the cloud of stuff around them was jamming them together so hard. That was it. Had the rest of that cloud of carbon shit not been around it, they would have just blown away from each other.
Right.
Interesting. Well, I've got one last article that's actually just some genuinely good news for everyone that I think will be a great way to kind of close things out. It's on the Ariel.
Going to an exoplanet.
Yeah.
Wait, we have an exoplanet?
An exoplanet mission.
Ariel.
Yeah, it's set to launch in 9 years, or well, I guess a little less since we're at the end of 2020.
Cool. So I can think of a lot of people with funny colored hair we should put on those ships.
Right. But
so
anyway,
here's a major problem with a ship that you send off to somewhere else. This is a major hurdle that a lot of people have been bringing up, and I think there's a really simple solution to it, which is just the next ship you build. So so here's the problem: you send a ship off to somewhere, and it takes a number of years to get there. The difficulty is that with the amount of years that you're going to have to wait on the journey to get there, technology is going to potentially catch up or advance such that a second ship launched will not only be able to catch up to you, but beat you there.
Oh yeah, overpassing is a very real possibility, especially at the rate
at
which we're advancing.
The obvious solution is to make the follow-up ships all capable of not only interfacing with, but then also incorporating the other ship.
Well,
and then
there's
stacks and goes, and it's so much simpler that way.
There's 2 parts to that, right? Like at the end of the day, there's the problem that you have is bureaucracy. And so when you start talking about NASA and where they lose money, it's launching rockets, right? They do some really great science, they do some really cool things, but they're constrained to like railroad tracks and a whole bunch of other stuff because of who won the contract for like 50 years back in the 1970s or 80s.
Okay, so ESA is saying that Ariel is the satellite that's going to do a chemical census of exoplanet atmospheres.
No, what I'm saying is that the problem that you have when you start designing long-term space missions is by the time you get it built, what Craig is saying is true, is the technology is significantly amped up. And the problem that you have with bureaucracy is that you can't implement new technology on old. We don't really do modular designs. So you start talking about something like the Mars rover, and that was designed for state-of-the-art at the time, a 2-megapixel camera. But when we launched that fucking thing, state-of-the-art was like a 20-some-odd megapixel camera. But we couldn't put a 20 megapixel camera on it because it wasn't designed for a 20 megapixel camera.
Well, not only that, everything that goes to space has to be certified to a completely different level as well.
So here's the thing. That's in keeping that's in keeping with the pace of technological advancement. Is you're going to see a kind of scaling jump, that kind of order of magnitude increase in some key factor or dimension. So you kind of have to build in this kind of legacy handling of things. So one of the reasons, for instance, why you might want to have a lower resolution camera later on is that the data rate of your transmission device is probably not going to be capable of providing all the data, at least at the time. Again,
Yeah, a 2
technology advances.
megapixel picture is significantly smaller than a 20 megapixel picture.
Right, so you're not going to be waiting days to get something that you can get in hours, that kind of thing.
That said,
So
the
if you have
data
a
is useful to
surveyed
have.
region, and they obviously they employ data compression, yada yada. It's just as an example, that you have you have known quantifiable risks and operations that you can establish as baseline at the beginning. And I did, I did a little bit of work with NASA on something, and they kind of get all the stuff hammered out before they do anything of interest. So I was working on eventually it would go into 3D printing rovers on Mars, or not rovers, drones to do surveying on Mars. So getting 3D printing optimized, that kind of shit. So like when they do stuff, they have a established base of technology that's going into something, and you don't just change your design at the end. You can do
I don't
backwards
imagine it's the kind of place that you
compatibility.
can fly by the seat of your pants, if you'll excuse the pun there.
Well, there's also not a Radio Shack on Mars. You know?
Oh, come on now. That's probably the only one that's still open.
Yeah, I mean, if we're being honest here.
Oh, I walked right into that one.
I mean, you know, they might even have some photo
There's not a
development
Circuit City on Mars.
too.
You want to go with that one too?
Sorry, what was that, Elon? I couldn't hear you.
I said there's not a Circuit City on Mars. You want to go with that one?
No, those are all on Venus.
You know what's going to end up happening? We're going to get to Mars, and the first thing that we're going to see is Jeff Bezos walking out of an Amazon warehouse.
Probably.
So at this,
probably so.
So
yeah,
this,
that sounds reasonable.
So this thing that they're launching is not to launch to an exoplanet. It is a satellite to do surveillance of or a survey of the chemical composition of atmospheres of exoplanets. Now, of course, they had to jam in the word diversity here, as if all exoplanets are the fucking same. You know, pardon my French on this one, but what the hell gives here? You're not going to find special snowflake planets. They're all going to be different.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the
some
nature
are big, some are small, some are rocky, some are gassy. Well, like there's that one planet that I thought was fascinating. That was made basically entirely of carbon. That was really close to a star. So it would have been a giant red hot diamond, but it was basically a diamond planet. You know, it just wouldn't have ever looked like it because glowing red and covered in soot.
Well, wasn't that one like tidally locked too?
I can't remember.
If I remember correctly, so Cracked. I'm gonna cite Cracked on this one.
Okay.
Because why the fuck not, right? So
Sure.
Cracked actually wrote an article on some of the most interesting exoplanets that we found. Yeah. And if I remember correctly, this one is not only basically solid diamond at this point because of the heat and pressure that it's at, because it's like super massive and super hot.
It's like 3 times Earth's mass or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. But it's also tidally locked.
Ah, okay.
And so they ended up doing the calculation on the wind speed that would be generated from such a planet. And it's like, you know, because at the end of the day, wind moves from areas that are hot to areas that are cold, which is just, you know, standard heat transport stuff, right? So this planet, because the surface that is tidally locked to the surface of the sun is going to be, you know, a couple hundred, maybe even a couple thousand degrees Fahrenheit.
1,000 C.
Might be, yeah. And the surface on the other side is going to be pretty much absolute zero. and it has an atmosphere. By the time this planet is fucking done, those winds are coming in at like a couple hundred miles an hour constantly across the surface of the planet.
So
that would be a fun place to live.
Yeah, you not only have the thermal expansion going on in the hot region, causing the especially given the intensity of the solar energy being deposited, because it's so close to the star. It's not only do you have that kind of thermal expansion going on, but the fact that it's accelerated by the low orbital period, the short orbital period, given its proximity to the star itself. Like the winds, it's entirely believable. Like the whole entire thing, it gets a bit of a. So that was one of the interesting things. But yeah, okay, it was tidally locked because one of the interesting things was how it was able to generate those winds, and it's because the momentum has to go somewhere, and it's just inside the thin atmosphere it has. So it might be really fast winds, but like we're talking Mars thin, like not as quite as low pressure as Mars because it's a big planet, but like it's not Earth's atmosphere.
So you're saying it would be a good wind farm?
I'm saying that it would be the greatest place to send all of these CNN assholes who want to report on climate. Because they put their fucking umbrella out and they would just be carried to the other side of the planet and we wouldn't give a shit.
So it depends on where you put the windmill, because if you put it too far away from the hot side, it'll freeze in place and it just won't work. You put it too close to the hot side, it'll just melt.
Oh, well, thankfully it's tidally locked, so there we go.
Yeah. Then again, the wind, it would have to be a pretty short windmill because the wind would otherwise just rip it off the surface.
But of course, we put windmills there that would actually unnaturally heat the planet, which is what they found happens if we actually put windmills here. We increase our climate, our effective climate impact. If we put windmills on Earth, then it would just burn coal.
You don't get any damn mixing, and you also have to produce the windmills.
Huh.
Which is.
The study I was talking about didn't actually go that far, but they just turned around and they found that the actual planet gets significantly hotter if we use wind energy. Or solar. Solar was a separate one because that's just, 20 some odd % proficient.
Now, solar is interesting because a lot of the energy, if you so you have to accept there's a couple inefficiencies. One is in the absorption, because you have reflection that occurs. One of the designs is to increase as much of the absorption as possible. But if you're not absorbing thermal energy directly, then that gets reflected out. So, to a certain extent, having a large amount of solar energy would also necessarily increase the albedo of the planet. So, in theory, you would end up getting a slight cooling effect, depending again on the absorption that you're going with. In terms of the electrical inefficiency, that would probably end up making up for the lost energy to a certain degree.
No, it actually, what you end up finding is that over large-scale solar farms, the net temperature increase is greater than without the solar farm there. Significantly greater, like 3 or 4 degrees Celsius.
Wow.
Well, a lot of that isn't going into the ground, so that actually does kind of make sense. Where it would be dissipated, it's actually being put directly back into the atmosphere.
I can get that for you. I have that. I have that study saved. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, actually, I'd like that as well. I want to link that for anybody that's going to be listening, because that's legitimately interesting and kind of flies in the face of what would kind of be
I'll link 2 studies. One is the wind study that finds that if wind energy was implemented nationwide, it would actually it would have to be over 100 years of us burning coal, not natural gas, but fucking coal, before we caught up to the impact, the actual climate impact of wind. Give me a little bit. I'll put those in chat.
Oh, yeah, no worries. Those will be available for people to check out later, or now, I guess, if you're listening when this is.
You might have to throw those on Scribd or something.
On what?
Scribd.
What's that?
It's a PDF hosting.
Scribd. I don't know. Is it Scribd?
Scribd.
I thought it was always Scribd. I don't know. Then I always thought it was GIF as well, which it is, by the way. It's not GIF.
Jif is bullshit. It's made
Yeah,
up.
that's wrong. Jif is peanut butter
It's peanut butter.
and nothing else. So, get it right.
Jif is peanut butter in a short period of time. That's it.
Yeah, basically. Possibly also a cornbread, but definitely nothing related to moving pictures. And if you think it is, you're wrong. And I think with that, that's a really good stopping point because everybody needs to know they're wrong sometimes. So, everybody, be well, and we'll talk to you again
Hold
really
on.
soon.
Hold
What?
on.
Oh, we've got a last minute
Before you
incoming.
go away, I'm never wrong, and this should be stated ahead of time.
Oh, well,
It's
that's
very
because
important.
you understand
That
that
is
it's
something
pronounced
you are
GIF.
definitely wrong about.
What's
we can-
that?
That you're wrong. That you're never wrong.
Well, all right. Let me rephrase that. I am
Nope,
wrong so
no.
infrequently that
No reviews. I'm
certain
hearing
individuals have tried to keep track, and it's less than once a month.
Well, this has all gone wrong, and if you guys don't stop, I'm going to unleash the Kraken.